I want to talk about in the second segment of the show about Perfect Dark. This was a game, guys, and a franchise that dates back to 2000. And obviously, guys, it really had its reign of time up to this point until 2010. For about a decade, this franchise was pretty popular, without a doubt. I mean, it dates back to the Nintendo 64, guys. So it's definitely a title that is no stranger to gaming. And I want to talk about what happened to Perfect Dark. So let's talk about it. So, guys, as I said, as far as the release timeline is concerned, regarding Perfect Dark, it dates back to 2000. You had Perfect Dark as well as Perfect Dark on the Nintendo Boy Color, or I should say the Game Boy Color and the Nintendo 64. So you had it come out on both of those, and then 5 years later, you get Perfect Dark Zero, which was pretty much the first game that I actually played in the Perfect Dark franchise. And I remember 5 years after that came Perfect Dark, which came out on the Xbox 360. And that was probably the most iconic, in my opinion. I really enjoyed Perfect Dark on the 360. But I don't know if everyone liked it on the 360, guys. It's a very interesting ordeal because Perfect Dark was set in the year 2020. We haven't seen or heard anything about Perfect Dark coming back. Where did this game go at this point? And are we going to see a continuation of it in the future? In an article, guys, that was written by Cody Peterson of Screen Rant, the game franchise Perfect Dark was set in the 2020s, but now that it is 2020, Rare acts as if they have shelved the game for the indefinite future. The video game Perfect Dark was set in the 2020s, but now that the future is actually here, where has the popular franchise gone? The original Perfect Dark game was developed by the studio Rare and released for the Nintendo 64 in 2000 to both player and critical acclaim. The game did well enough to achieve Nintendo's Player Choice Award and is typically cited as one of the greatest video games ever released. There was even a sequel on the Xbox 360 in 2005, which did relatively well despite critics feeling as though it did not live up to the expectations set by its predecessor. And that's probably one of the big things, guys, was that I never played it on the Nintendo 64. Obviously, I'd seen footage, but playing it on the 360, it was kind of all new to me, so I really enjoyed it. But the critics are the ones who felt that it just didn't meet those expectations that were set by, of course, the original Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 360. The original Perfect Dark was a first-person shooter which, along with its spiritual prequel, GoldenEye 007 on the N64, completely changed the world of video games. Players guided protagonist Joanna Dark through a series of missions and spent the majority of the game shooting bad guys, deploying gadgets, and completing various objectives in order to prevent an alien invasion of Earth. Perfect Dark shooting and mechanics and complex enemy AI made it revolutionary for the Nintendo 64 and the time period in which it released. The game had several multiplayer options, allowing players to play cooperatively or competitively during either story campaign or throughout Perfect Dark's plethora of multiplayer modes, and it even received an HD remake for the 360. So look, guys, really quick, one thing I want to mention is the fact that this was even a great multiplayer experience in today's day and age. We're coming up with, obviously, we're in the year of the PS5 as well as the Xbox Series X. And, I mean, obviously, gaming has changed over the years, but one of those things that has really changed is back in the day, guys, video games were meant to be really story-played games where you were playing a story, and then it changed to becoming more of a multiplayer focus, and that's pretty much where everybody is at this point, is multiplayer. A lot of people have forgotten about a lot of those single-player stories. This is a game that really kind of merges all those things in one and could do really well in today's market, in my opinion. The company behind Perfect Dark, Rare, is well known for having created titles and games that were integral to a lot of gamers' childhood. Rare also worked on titles like Banjo-Kazooie, Donkey Kong Country, and Viva Pinata, along with many others. After many years of working with Nintendo, the company was finally acquired by Microsoft in 2002 Despite receiving favorable reviews for most of the games produced for their new owner, Rare Games, excluding the sequel title Perfect Dark Zero, tended to sell very poorly, and Microsoft finally restructured the company around 2010. From there, Rare seemed to move away from their usual quirky and innovative franchises and tended to work on Kinect games and multiplayer titles like Sea of Thieves. So, here's step number 2, guys. Any time that there's a franchise that has been kind of just set aside or put on an indefinite hiatus really comes down to a number of things. Number 1 is usually sales. 2 is usually some type of critical reception that is like, that of negative or, generally favorable or even average at best. It usually comes down to those 2 main things. And number 3 is usually if, the main developer or the publishers are thinking that their resources for a company like Rare to move into a different direction or move into a different IP. So it's kind of like the big 3 usually. So number 1, guys, bad reception, of course, on Perfect Dark on the Xbox 360. Number 2 was poor sales. And so those 2 things don't really go well together, certainly. And so then Rare, of course, moved on to Sea of Thieves. So that could be probably where Microsoft decided just to kind of move them in that direction. Perfect Dark was innovative and groundbreaking when it came out over 20 years ago. And it's strange Microsoft would buy a company just to later discard their more popular franchises. A large portion of gamers can remember late nights with their friends playing the deathmatch mode and marveling at the amazing visuals and game mechanics. To this day, there are still those who try and beat speedruns or break other records centered around the game. Maybe one day Rare will return to its roots and grace fans with another Perfect Dark entry. But for now, it seems like they are content to work within Microsoft's umbrella on other unrelated titles. So look, guys, here's the thing. I mean, I feel that Perfect Dark is another franchise that deserves to coexist. And I think it would do very well if it were to release with the Xbox Series X as well as, of course, like the PlayStation 5. I think that would be something that could be really special. Now, Microsoft owns Rare, so it would probably be an Xbox exclusive. But the fact of the matter is why isn't this game coming out? Obviously, guys, the biggest things, like we already said, sales as well as critical reception. I mean, those were pretty negative, right, around some of these games. And so I would say that at this point, Perfect Dark, you can never say never, like it'll never come back, but it's in probably an indefinite hiatus at this point, guys. And I hope that it comes back at some point, really given, a fresh breath of life, so to speak, on the next generation consoles. But let me know what you guys think. Do you guys want to see another Perfect Dark game? And what do you guys really think happened to the Perfect Dark franchise? Let me know in the comment section below. And for more Perfect Dark content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.